Hello, I'm Daniel Dubois, your host for the Think Like a Wizard podcast. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 1, Divination. So, guys, we'll jump right into it, and I'll introduce you to the fact that we have a co-host now for the podcast. So,
And I'm
Michaela,
very
do you want to
excited to
introduce
be
yourself?
here. And I'm very excited to be here, jumping in early, as sometimes happens. So my name is Michaela Gaffen Stone, and I am thrilled to be invited on this podcast and to be co-host moving forward. And I'm sure we're going to go some interesting places. I can't wait to see where that is.
Okay, so since this is about divination, I think we should probably share a little bit about how you became the co-host. So when I started this podcast, I didn't want it to be a solo project. I've always wanted to have a co-host, but through my own, we'll say my fears of success and not succeeding, I didn't want to bring anyone down with me. So I started doing the episodes on my own. However, again, because this is about spiritual awakenings, the spirits I work with wanted me to have a co-host. So what they did, instead of pushing me to do an episode with someone right away, they told me to keep in the background to look for a witch. And so I went on with my podcast. Let's keep that in the back of my mind, even for look at like joining Reddit boards with witches and spellcasters and whatever, seeing if something would click. And then I put out finally now to have a co-host, and very quickly after we met once professionally, and then Michaela said that she would like to take that role. So why don't you tell them a little bit how it happened on your side?
Well, I saw this invitation for a co-host for a podcast, and I don't usually pay attention to those things too much because I have my own podcast and I have a bunch of things going on. So typically I don't stop and look, but that one kind of called me back for a second look. And I thought, let me investigate this. I'm definitely being called to look at this and talk about this some more. And you did not know right away that I identify as a witch. I'm an eclectic witch, which means I do all kinds of things from crystals and herbs to, I don't know, mandalas and back again. There's lots of things. There's nothing off limits per se, I guess, except blood sacrifice. I don't do that. But at least I haven't done that yet. Hey, let's keep
Never
that
say
space
no,
open.
as yeah.
Let's keep that open. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's certainly not on my agenda right now.
Mm.
And so when I listened to your podcast and I realized that you were working in the spiritual realm and identify as a wizard, I was like, that's why I took a second look. This is interesting to me. And so we talked about it some more, and here we are.
And that's really interesting because that's actually what I was looking for. My whole thing leading up to having a co-host was that whole setup is what I was looking for.
Okay.
And so one of my reasons for wanting to share it, like, because I didn't really interview you and stuff. We had a short little chat, but I wanted to go in without knowing a lot about you, because part of the thing I want to show with the whole point of the podcast is that you can be guided to something. And since divination is a good subject to start on, because that was pretty much the core of how this came together.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I was actually excited to work with you.
And it's a funny thing, but I typically don't follow up with learning everything about the person or the place or anything like that. I want to form my own opinion first, and then I'll find out other things later. But I prefer to be guided rather than led, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go with the flow, and then I'll see where that takes me. And I do that with travel as well. I've traveled I've literally traveled all over the world at this point in my life, but I traveled a lot in Southeast Asia, and I would intentionally not read about where I was going. I did not want to know what other people thought of it. I wanted to experience it first, and then I'll read about it when I get back. So that's a sort of method I like to use. And then I feel more open to being guided somewhere or to someone.
Yeah. Well, see, that's one of the other things I also like to see. So already good that you're the co-host because you're hitting the topics. Like, so what was I going to say? Lost my train of thought. So because I tend to specialize in channeling, there is even for me, sometimes I sit there and it's like, okay, whatever, I'm being manipulated. But like even like I said, describing the podcast, okay, I'm not ready to do it with someone else yet. Okay, well then don't do it with someone right now, but keep looking. This is what you're looking for, and take your time to get to where you need to go. Like, yeah, there's going to be moments where literally there is direct manipulation kind of a thing. But most of my experiences with that have been more amusing. This is not a story I usually share because, well, I've already spoken about talking with spiritual beings and different kinds of things, but I live on the north shores of Lake Huron. And one of my experiences is that I'll go there occasionally and I'll talk to the spirit that looks over the lake. And we were discussing something. And at the end, I found myself dancing. And I'm like, well, hold on a second. Why am I dancing? But I like, but I knew I felt the flow of the energy coming from the spirit and I knew what it was trying to do. And, but it ended up like me kind of dancing. And this is kind of I kind of maybe should have been better at making a more formal step up to it, but you don't always have to be receptive to being told things. Sometimes it's doing things that gives you information. And we were kind of working on how you can transmit information. In my head, I have the idea that which can instruct can inform, and that which can inform can instruct. And so we were communicating more by me moving in a dancing way that was like the water than we were by it just speaking to me directly.
Hmm.
And this is not like a spirit I work with. This is just like a spirit that's in the environment. I'm like, hey, how's it going? Kind of a thing. At best, you can call it a friendship of some kind.
I
How it is work in the spirit world. I said I don't have like an encyclopedia of the spirit world. I just my whole job is to give the functionality and the basics. This is how you interact. This is how the flow works. That kind of thing. So actually, this is sounding like an episode that I would make where I start and stop things.
Right. Well, the thing with interaction with the environment, whether it's spiritual,
Mm,
physical, whatever it is, that's that's kind of the thing that informs me being an eclectic
mm,
witch, because it's not always one way that's going to work, and it's not always one way that calls to me. So I like the freedom of giving up, if you will, and just saying, okay, I'm not going to force this into a box. I'm not going to force this to look this way. I'm going to let it go where it goes and see what happens. And curiosity, I think, is a huge friend there. And sometimes I like to experiment and just sort of, well, what happens if I do try this? Or what happens if I go over here? And then other times it's just, oh, that's the thing that's coming to me to go do. So I'll go do that. And I don't have the barriers of, but I only operate this way,
right,
or I only deal with this. It's like, no, I'm open so I can go with the flow. It's not a lack of boundaries, it's a lack of barriers.
right,
And that's a significant thing. And the rules, I don't go with other people's rules either. Like sometimes I'll be asked, are you Wiccan or are you a witch? And they said, no, I'm not Wiccan. That's a
mm,
religion. And
right,
you know, the threefold laws and what
mm,
have you, it smacks of Christianity, which if that works for you is fine. That's cool. Go do that thing.
mm,
But that's not, I don't need those rules. I don't need to be bound by somebody else's moral code. I'm good. I've got it figured out, and I'm the person dealing with it, right?
right.
So I don't need to follow somebody else's rule book, their set of instructions. So, like I said, it's not a lack of boundaries, it's a lack of barriers. And I kind of like that.
That's a good way of putting it. Absolutely.
Yeah, works for me. I'm happy with it.
Yeah. Okay, I think now that I'm a little bit less nervous, I'll take a second to describe for the listeners what divination is, or at least how I view it, or as I
Okay,
like to say, in the wizard sense.
go for it.
That's yeah, I started using that a few episodes ago in the wizard sense, instead of saying
Okay,
spiritual all the time or using the same term. But
okay.
so divination basically is nothing more complicated than seeking guidance in a supernatural way. There's many methods, many ways of it showing up. For me, I'll either get it just being awake, like, feeling the flow of the energy around me, having literal communication with spirits or through dreams. But over the years, I've done pendulums, Ouija boards, tarot cards. I've done I Ching. I've done rune stones, bibliomancy. I think that's the pretty much the majority of it. And then I'll usually take like whatever, I'll see whatever someone else is doing. But those I've actually really looked into and actually done. And it's funny. And I found for the most part, when you're using tools, which most of those are,
Hmm.
is that there's usually a random element and a set of symbols. The random element being taking your ego out of the way, to use your
Right.
term. So
Yep.
you take your ego out of the way, and then the spirit can choose through you the symbol it wants to convey to you. And it's interesting because it makes me think like when I listen to people, I remember I was watching a documentary on tarot cards, and people were saying, well, these don't work because the original drawings are this and the original definitions are this. And I'm like, okay, if you use divination tools long enough, you realize none of that matters. You know,
Exactly.
even when you do tarot, even if you do it, as far as I understand, in the strictest sense, your cards matter in the sense of what they inspire in you.
They connect to you.
Yeah.
So somebody else's rule book isn't important. And that I feel that very keenly. Like if you are following somebody else's guidance as to how your tools are going to work, then really where's your agency? Where is your openness to that interaction if you're bound by somebody else's description of what it's supposed to look like? So, if you were on a desert island and you had a Ouija board and some tarot cards and a pendulum
Mhm.
and you didn't have the rule books with you, would that mean that they didn't work? No, they totally work, right? Of course they would. But your interpretation is your interpretation. And that's, again, what I prefer to go with because if those things are connected to you, and like a pendulum, for example, if it doesn't resonate with you, it isn't going to do anything useful. So you kind of need to make that connection.
Mhm.
And once you have that connection, rule books go away and
Right.
and you know how that thing's talking to you, how it's working with you. So you could make your own tarot cards. Like it
Well,
really,
and that's perfectly it, right?
yeah. I mean, people do that, right? And then they sell them and they say, "Hey, look at these. These are beautiful shadow work cards," or
Mhm.
"Look at these. They're all about flowers," or whatever it is. And that's cool, but that person made them, and then
Yeah.
they attach the meanings to them that they think go with that. And if you like that, awesome, do it. But if you don't, you could make your own or however you want to do it. There will be rule-bound people
Mhm.
in every sphere of life, and this is absolutely one of them. I mean, I belong to a whole bunch of different groups, and
Right.
some are a little more, shall we say, retentive than
Mhm.
others about what things are supposed to look like. And I, of course, gravitate to the ones that are a little more free flowing because community is the deal, and interaction and expression. These are the things that I'm looking for. The rules, like rules are everywhere, seriously, and they're all man-made everywhere you look. So
That's
nature
right.
has its own rules. Follow those, and you don't need to worry about the rest.
Well, and that's exactly it, right? It's when it comes down to something you said when you said, oh, a wizard. And this is true. All the spirits I work with are like, call yourself a wizard. Call yourself a wizard. And I'm like, part of me is okay, but as much as I've done digging into folklore and mythology and magic and stuff, yes, I totally qualify as a wizard. But a part of my brain thinks of like people are used to the idea of like Harry Potter, maybe even Harry Dresden or well, Merlin's not a good example because Merlin actually falls more into what a wizard is than having a school, depending on what version of Merlin you're used to.
Hmm.
I've heard versions of Merlin where he's basically, he's a guy who dispenses wisdom and has a connection to the supernatural forces. And then everything else is basically built upon that legend. So in that sense, he's a real wizard. But most of people's, I always think of people looking at it and going, oh, well, here's, a wizard in popular culture.
Yeah, where's your pointy hat?
Right. Where's my point? Where's my want? I mean, like I've had experiences where I've worked with spirits and we've done stuff to the weather and, we've made people do things and vice versa and stuff. But generally, although again, I'm encouraged to call myself a wizard, I tend to call myself a bridge between the spiritual and the instead. But wizards, actually, I was going to start this episode. If I was less nervous, I would have started this episode with saying it's time for us to speak as witches and wizards do.
Right, which is a nice one. Maybe we could start another episode that way.
Yeah.
For the listeners, I promise I'm not doing anything to make him nervous.
No,
I'm
no,
just
it's just more of a me thing. I
I'm
should
just
probably say, you know what? As I start saying to you, probably say it. So the first season of this podcast was me coming to an end of doing some shadow work in the,
right.
in the shadows secretly, only concerned with people who needed to know it. But it was a lot of channeling, it was a lot of effort, and I was burning out near the end. And so the episodes, to me, you don't see my normal behavior. You do see some of it, like there's nothing fake in it, but it's me running out of energy.
Subdued you.
Yeah, to subdue me.
No,
And you can't see my limbs flailing and all that kind of stuff when I normally speak.
right.
So I've gotten into the habit of not talking about anything. So it's been a big change for me to even do the podcast, frankly,
Oh, okay.
to even come out and talk about it. Like the fact that anyone knows about it, the fact that even since we both know each other through Wildfit, that even on Wildfit calls that I mention anything is that's me coming out of my shell kind of a thing.
And I think you'd
Because
be
I'm basically leaving the
surprised.
shadows and coming into the light now.
I
And it's a
think you'll
whole
be
adjustment
surprised.
for me.
I think you'll be surprised how many people are there
Yeah.
understanding what you're saying. And
Well,
I know of at least one person who's a shaman.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, there's
at
I've
least
posted a
one.
few times. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've only been in that environment for a fairly short space of time, and I already know that. So there will be people there that, the connections haven't been made yet. But I think we're everywhere. That's the thing. We are literally everywhere, and people don't realize that. Everybody tends to think, well, if it's not sort of in your face,
Yeah.
then I must be the only one.
Hmm.
And when you do find a community and when you can build a community, that's like the best thing because then you realize, okay, I might be unusual, but I'm not a freak. I'm different, but I'm not a freak.
Yeah.
And and you can just relax into being who you are. Now, one of the tools that I use is human design, and you're aware of this.
Yes.
But I love human design. I have transformed lives with that because the stories that you're told that make you
Mhm.
feel wrong about things, or you want to hide this aspect of you because, hey, that is a little weird. Everybody said so when I was a kid, or whatever it is. Those are your gifts. And so I
Yeah.
love to show that to people and
Hmm.
say, hey, that thing that you think is wrong, let me show you how that is a beautiful gift and you need to use it because it's there for you, whether you ignore it or not. But if you
Hmm.
ignore it, it's going to block things up for you and get in your way. If you work with it, then you have this open field to play with.
Right.
And I've worked with everybody from I think teens to 70s, no, 80, early 80s.
No. Yeah.
So, and they can all get transformations from
Mhm.
knowing that they are right when they've been told they're wrong. And there's no bad human design. There isn't one.
No.
So I
No.
love working with
That's
this.
the other big thing. Michaela, you say that. So one of the things is when I got my human design chart done, I
Mhm.
shared it with people, and it made my life infinitely easier. Everyone's
It
like,
is.
"Oh, okay, I get it."
Yes, yes. In fact, that's how I got into human design in the first place, was I was working with someone on a tech project. Now, I am not tech inclined. No way, not my thing. And I'm not interested in learning it. So it's really, really not my thing. But this person was doing some tech for me. And she said, you know what? Our working relationship isn't as smooth as it ought to be. It's just not quite right.
Right.
Have you done your human design chart? And now I have a very science background. I have
Right.
4 degrees, and we're talking science all the way.
Yes.
So
Another reason
I'm
why I wanted you as a co-host.
right. So I'm looking at her very skeptically, like,
Mm,
you do know I do science, right? And she's, yeah. Have you looked at human design? No, isn't that a place
mm,
where you throw your money away? Like, what are you talking about? And she said, look, just go to your chart, give it to me, and we'll go from there. So I trusted her, and she's a smart woman. She's got her stuff together.
mm,
So okay, I'll do this thing. So I went and got my chart. And this is some time ago now. I went and got my chart, gave it to her, and then as a behavior analyst, I'm like, okay, let me watch, let me
yeah.
see what's she going to do with this. And I watched her face like a hawk.
Mhm,
And all these emotions flitted across it and got me more and more interested. And then she kind of sat back, her shoulders went down, and she said, ah, okay, I've got it now. Now I know how to work with you. And she changed a few things in our schedule, in how
mhm,
she was telling me things, this kind of thing. And suddenly everything was going a whole lot smoother. And I was like, okay, now she's piqued my interest. What is this? So I went and investigated a little bit more, and I started trying things on family and friends and what have
mhm,
and how does this look and what does that look like? Going in very kind
right.
of scientifically. And I found that it didn't matter who or how I worked with it, it was accurate. It was not inaccurate at all. So, as I always do, if I'm going to dive into something, I'm all in. So,
Right.
I'm talking with people, I'm learning from mentors, books, videos, like every format I can get. And then my intuition kicked in, and I've never looked back, because when I do somebody's human design, it's not only what I'm looking at in the chart, but then a whole lot of intuition comes in to really give it a 3D or even a 5D kind of presence. It's not just
Right.
flat on paper. And wow, I love it. It gives me energy, it gives the person I'm talking to energy. We all come out of this in a good space. And like I said, there is no bad design. There's only one you're not working with very well. And in which case, I'm going to show you, okay, these are your gifts. And I see themes when I do someone's chart.
Mm,
And that wasn't taught to me, but I can't not see it. So there will
yeah.
be, I view them as rivers. Like if you can see my hands, I'm
Right.
moving
Yeah.
down, doing this river kind of motion, because I see typically it's 3 is the usual number, but it
Mm,
can be 2, sometimes 4. Usually it's 3 rivers of theme that if you tap into any of those rivers,
right.
you're on the smooth, relatively speaking, smooth path to what's correct for you. It'll take you to your purpose. It'll take you to the way you can do things without struggle. Now, if I say it's with ease, I don't mean, just
Right.
like you got to sleep in the hammock and wake up 6 months later
That's
and you're
right. Yeah.
cool. But it's just you're not having to do battle with it. It flows. And those are the themes that I can't help but see. It just kind of came up as I worked with human design. And I
Mm,
can't explain it, but just like you, I'm a 2-4. And the
right.
whole part of the 2 is that you know stuff that you cannot possibly explain.
You know what? Can I
Put
ask you
a
something on
gun to
this?
my head and I couldn't explain it to
Yeah.
you because
Can
it's
I ask you
just
something, Michaela? So I looked at different sources about it. And so too, like I used the app My Human Design and they call it the natural. But then I think on YouTube, the Human Design Academy calls it the Hermit.
yes. So the
So, like, I mean,
original
the description is the same.
the original name
It's
for it
just the
is
name
the
that's
hermit.
different.
The
Yeah,
original name for it is the hermit, and
right.
that's because the 2 line, and as it's a 2-4. I'll
Yeah.
just go to human design briefly.
Mhm.
The 2-4, the 2 is conscious, it's your personality, it's what you know about you.
Right.
The 4 is 6 generations of genetic information, it's unconscious. Other people will see it about you before you do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So looking just at the 2, this is one that you're aware of, and you have this hermit-like tendency because you have to work on stuff that other people don't need to be involved in. And you can't tell them anyway because you just know what you know. And
Right.
it's not, you cannot be put in a box But at a certain point, people will come and call you out of your cave
Hmm.
to share that knowledge. And where the four kicks in is this needs to be through a network. If you put it outside of the network, it's not going to land well. It's not going to be received. But think mycelium, right? Within
Right.
this network, it can go far, this thing that you know. But people can't expect you to explain it. They can try, but you can't do that. It's simply unavailable to you. So you have that push-pull of being a hermit and
Right.
needing to network, right? And so the 2-4 is always in ebb and flow. It's always like, yeah, I just need to be on my own right now. And at some point, people will come and haul you out of your cave. And
Yeah.
then you'll need to run back to your cave. And that is how it goes for a 2-4.
Right.
So it's that is typically how it runs, and it's so freeing to know that you don't have to explain yourself to anybody because you can't.
Well, that's the thing, right? And it's funny. I had this discussion with a former employer of mine. We were on our way to it was like a work gathering, and I was riding with him. And where we were going, it was another employee's home, but she lived like way out in farmland. And I was like, wow, like, I like my time by myself, but I want to be able to just walk out the door and there's people there. And he looked at me like I had like, three eyes on my, you know, but I'm like, what's so
Uh-huh.
complicated? I want my alone time but then I want to have access to people. I don't want to have to come in 10 miles from the mountain, come down the mountain, you know.
Yeah, yeah, I can understand that. But that push pull will always be there, and it's correct for you. You know,
Yeah.
that's just the surface of the 2-4. But I find it was so relieving when I discovered that, oh, so I do know things that I can't explain. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Because as somebody who's always studying, and like I said, there's 4 degrees. What that tells you is that I got the pieces of paper for the study that I did, but they weren't the biggest point. One of them was because I kind of needed that to get my behavior
Mm-hmm.
analysis certification, but the others were it's interesting. And by the way, it comes with a piece of paper, and that's kind of
Yeah.
cool.
Well, that's the other big one, right? I think as a two, a piece of paper in the modern world anyways starts to matter. Like to me, like not that we need it to do our thing, but for reassurance for ourselves that we can go out into the world.
I think it's shifting. I think that
Well, it
perception.
is now because of everything self-published now, and you can go on YouTube and you can like we're doing a podcast and
But I think it's shifting and people are becoming more interested in, okay, so what can you do? What are the results?
yeah,
And it's a slow transition, relatively speaking, because old values, old
right.
mores kind of die hard. But this one it's on its way out for sure. And I think it's about time too, because for some things you need that kind of knowledge. Yes. Particularly
Mm-hmm.
if you're going to do science stuff, whether it's behavioral or whatever it is, you kind of need to have that theory. You need to have that background.
Yeah.
But for so many other things, it's much better to be engaged and figure it
Mm-hmm.
out. And I don't think it makes a difference to the person's value in any way, shape, or form if they have a piece of paper or they don't. And I'd love us to get, as a society, I'd love us to get way away from valuing a piece of paper over somebody that can do things. Like, I can sort your behavior out for you, no problem, but I can't fix
Mm-hmm.
your car.
Well, and it's funny. I've had this discussion now a few times with people or with younger people, and I keep saying like, okay, a part of me dies every time I say this to someone, but it's like to me, your grades and your accolades don't matter. But when you don't know anyone, it's what they use to learn about you. So we're still kind of in a place where at least
Yeah,
where the paper indicates something,
well,
but
it's
it
kind of
only
a
gives an
remnant.
introduction. It doesn't speak about all of you.
It's a remnant of a
Yeah.
caste system, honestly. It
Hmm.
puts you in a certain level, right?
Right.
Rightly or wrongly, because you can have some complete jerks that have degrees, and then you can
True.
have some amazingly lovely people who didn't finish high school.
Hmm.
And who do you want to hang out with? Well, I'm going to go with the person that didn't finish high school, obviously. In fact, earlier today, I was having a discussion about somebody who I just thinking about this guy makes me smile.
Right.
And it's Richard Branson.
Okay.
The reason he makes me smile is not
Mhm.
all about the money. That's like, have a blast, dude. Like, really enjoy
Mhm.
it. That's fun. It's energy, enjoy
Mhm.
it. But what I really admire about this guy is he is open and curious and willing to try pretty much anything. And when people tell him, and they
Mhm.
inevitably do, tell him, oh, you can't do that. That's crazy. That's not going to work. He gives the biggest, brightest smile you ever did see, and then he
Mhm.
goes and does it anyway. He's not aggressive about it. He's not argumentative about it. He's just like, I hear you, and now I'm going to go do the thing. And he does it. And then further to that, when things don't work, which inevitably happens from time to time,
Mhm.
because he does really put
Absolutely.
himself out there,
Mhm.
when things don't work, he doesn't take it personally. He looks at it as, huh, that was really interesting. Now, how am I going to do that differently next time?
Right.
And that to me, that's worth everything. And I don't
Mhm.
think he graduated high school.
I don't know
I'm
if he
pretty
did.
sure he doesn't have a degree.
Mhm. But you hear that, listeners? You got to
So,
make your mistakes.
and
Even billionaires do it.
yeah, no, there's a lot of top-notch people out there who have gone far in life, and the things that they have in common are that they're open, willing to try,
Mhm.
and willing to fail. And you might not like Elon Musk, a lot of people don't, but what is admirable about him is that he's not listening to anybody else's tune. He's dancing his own,
Right.
and and he'll try stuff. When SpaceX blows up, he gets excited about figuring out how he can make it last longer next time.
Mhm.
Okay, so he has the money, he can cover that. But the point is, he does it. He tries things. And I really find that that matters so much more than a piece of paper
Mhm.
or where you were born or any of those things. That's what I look for in a person is how willing are you to go try something, especially if it's crazy.
Right. When you say that, I kind of want my listeners to really pay attention to this. Okay. I have this discussion a lot of times with people, and I'm going to use Donald Trump as an example
Okay.
because I know a lot of people who don't like him. He's not my favorite guy either. But there's one thing I've learned to do over the years is that whether or not I like someone, but they have success, like he does, he got the president. So the thing is, regardless of what you think of him personally, he did something. He found a way to get something done. And so, from a spiritual perspective, you have to learn from that. You can't just now shut away everything because you don't like someone. You look at how they succeeded, what they did to succeed. Like, if by all counts Donald Trump was as dumb as I've heard people say since he's been president, he wouldn't have any money. He wouldn't have made it to be president. He wouldn't, like, even if Truth Social, whatever, is losing money, the point is that's a platform that still had tens of thousands of people, if not hundreds of thousands of people jump onto it because of what he did. You know what I mean? Like the whether you admire someone or not, or like them or don't like them, that doesn't matter to me. Like I said, I'm not his biggest fan by any means, but I understand that he did something and that he figured out how to do something and he got something to work that most people don't didn't make work or couldn't make work or whatever the situation is, but he made it work. And so whether there's a moral, like I don't want to attach like a morality or anything to it, just the idea that this is a guy who half the population disrespects and half the population loves, you know, but he
So,
still managed to do something.
so the common factor with these three guys, apart from them being male and
Right.
money being involved, right? Apart from those things, the common factor is they're looking forward and up,
Mm-hmm.
vision. It's if you're visualizing, if you're having a vision about something, you tend to look up,
Right.
right? And these are people who look up and they don't see obstacles.
Right.
They see learning opportunities, they see things to deal with, they
Mm-hmm.
don't see obstacles. They just go for it. And it's the going for it that I admire and the undaunted spirit
Yes.
of, well, yeah, that failed spectacularly. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean anything about me, and I'm going to do it again.
Right.
And I'm going to do it again differently.
Right.
And that's where you learn from. One of the things when I'm doing human design that I'll point out to people is, to use that very well-worn metaphor of life is like a river, it kind
Mhm.
of is. You can choose, are you going to do battle going upstream, or are you going to go with the flow? That's your first question. Then the thing to realize is those smooth parts of the river where you just float down in your canoe and
Mhm.
you're all good, that's a coffee break in life, right? The reality that
Yeah.
the stuff where things really happen, those are the rapids. That's where you develop your muscles by paddling like stink
Right.
and,
Mhm.
navigating and getting through that patch. But you learn something about yourself, about how you respond, about what's there to respond to, and about what's on the other side. You
Mhm.
learn those things by going through those rapids. If all you ever did was lie back in your canoe and float down the river, you would have a very boring, uneventful, non sort of experiential life. You would just be
Right.
a passenger. You wouldn't be actually doing anything with your time here. And my personal perspective on that is how could anybody be okay with that? So, I like to talk to people about coming out of their comfort zones.
Yes.
As a comfort zone, it's a misnomer, right? Like it's not comfortable, it's familiar. And
Right.
we tend to mistake the familiar for comfortable. But, because going out of the familiar
Mhm.
means you're going to try something new.
Right.
Eek, scary. But, hey, let's go do
Well, no,
scary.
you're right. It's the less energy use. I refer to it as the where I don't have to spend energy.
Right. But it's then you're not going to get any reward either. You're
That's
not going
true.
to get anything for it. If you never step out,
Hmm.
then you don't know what's there. You don't find it, you don't try it, you don't experience it. So, I'm a fan of the feel the fear, be aware of it,
Right.
and then go do the thing.
Right.
Because otherwise, what are you doing?
Well, and that's the big thing, right? Like, so my whole thing about spiritual communication is you got to learn your emotions because your subconscious self is your gatekeeper between the spiritual and the physical, as well as even the use of your resources. So fear is not there to prevent you from doing something. Fear is there to make you think about what you're doing, but it's not there to stop you. The only
Right.
time fear stops you is when you have no solution.
Yeah, fear is an awareness.
Right.
It makes you acutely aware.
Hmm.
So, if you're, I went hang gliding once, and when you're about to jump off the cliff, holding onto this kite, which
Right.
is basically what a hang glider is, it's a
Yeah.
kite.
Yeah.
You're about to do that. I assure you, you are keenly aware of where you are in the world and what's happening. And it's actually when you're airborne that you get a little more distracted because, well, I didn't die and I'm still airborne. So now you start to look around and see what's going on. But doing stuff like that, the fear is a keen awareness that's going to help you stay alive. So, like, is everything in order? Am I strapped in? Am I holding on properly? Am I doing all the things? All of that awareness will come from the fear that you have. The
Right.
mistake is to think that fear is there to stop you.
That's
It's
right. It's not there for that at all.
no, it's an awareness thing, and you can use your intuition to know if something's safe or not. That will always tell you.
Mhm.
And we all have intuition. Everybody's experienced that thing where, you look back and say, I knew I shouldn't do that. That
Yeah.
feeling you had when you knew that thing, that's your intuition talking to you. So, and it doesn't lie and it only tells you once.
Right.
Yeah, don't go down that alley at 3 o'clock in the morning. But
Right.
if you're trying something new, if you're stepping out into the unknown, the fear is just to heighten your senses.
Mm.
But we mistake that. And we're
Yeah.
told, from childhood, your parents want to keep you safe. The society want to
Mhm.
keep you kind of confined, if you will, or contained is probably a better
Right.
word, so that they know
Yes.
what to do with you, right? So you're contained, and then you're shaped into this being that they think you ought to be. And we're sort of set off on this path, and fear gets changed from what it's there to do to something that's used as a weapon, if you will, to keep you contained. I mean, think of fairy stories. for kids,
Hmm.
right? Particularly the old ones, Hans Christian Andersen and Brothers Grimm and all those things. They're all about kids going out into the woods and being
Right.
eaten, right? And they're all about evil witches that are going to
Mm.
cook children and all this kind of stuff. The purpose of them was parents told these stories to their kids because the parents were gone all day and half the night working in the fields, and they needed their kids to
Mm.
stay home. How are you going to keep your kids home? Terrify the living blazes out of them
Yeah.
so they wouldn't dare go in the woods or they're going to be eaten, right? And so
Right.
it was effective. That fear kept them contained. Fear is a great weapon that politicians use on their population all the time. If you want to divide the public,
That's
fear,
right.
boom. It is a tool that gets wielded all over the place. It's like a big broadsword. And whoever's holding that sucker can really make a difference to
Mm.
the world. And if you're in a state of fear, it's awfully hard to be spiritual in any way, shape, or form. You can't connect with anything when you're in a state of fear. It
That's
keeps you
true.
contained. So, that fear thing, if anybody listening is
Mm.
in a state of fear or is aware of having a lot of that, this is something for you to work with. This
Mm.
is it's called shadow work for a reason, but it's not the light sunny side of life, but
Mm.
it's so important to get a grip on your relationship with fear so that it doesn't rule you.
You know what? There's a few of my listeners who need that message. I hope they've heard it.
Well, hopefully so, because it's so important and it's so life-changing.
Mm.
And you can be stuck in a place of fear. It's yeah, it's like this big barrier that wraps around you and holds you in place. And people are going to encourage it because it keeps you safe. It keeps you where they by safe, always envisage these sort of air quotes around it because safe simply means you're not experiencing anything.
That's right.
Just stuck,
Absolutely.
right? You are mired in this one spot, but everybody knows where you are. So when you start doing
Hmm.
things that are different, it scares the hell out of people because they don't know what they're looking at and they don't know what it means for them. Now, we both do WildFit,
Right.
looking at nutrition. One of the things that our clients are going to
Mm.
invariably experience is somebody in their environment, somebody close to them, partner
Right.
maybe, is going to experience fear, and that will show itself as annoyance or sabotage in some
Hmm.
way of the person making the changes.
That's right.
And the reason is they don't understand what's happening, how far it's going to go, or what it means for them. And does that mean now that they're doing things wrong? Does that mean they have to change? Does that mean that this other person is moving on from them in some way? Like how far is this change going to go?
Yes. And you know what, Michaela? What you say, okay, this, listeners, okay, because you're going through a spiritual awakening, this, what Michaela is talking about, is perfect. When you go through it and you start seeing things in a more spiritual perspective, people are going to be afraid. They're going to think you don't connect with them anymore. They're going to be afraid of losing you. They're going to, all these things are going to come up, and some people will fight you on it. Or they're afraid for you too. Sometimes they think, oh, what's going on with you? Some like I know I've talked to some of you, and yes, I know some exactly what happened to you. So think about it. When you're listening to this, okay, I guess one of the rules of this podcast is no matter what we're talking about, if there's a lesson in it, listen for it and take that lesson. It doesn't matter what we said. And in fact, I'll give you something to work with. And that ties in with divination. There are times where I've gone to someone for a reading and they're totally wrong. Okay. Like completely wrong. But for lack of a better way of putting it, I've hacked their connection and I got the information I needed, even though the person receiving the information was completely wrong. But I
Interesting.
managed to hack into their connection where they were getting their information from, and I ended up getting all the information I needed. But that actually is an aside, and this is a story about me that I haven't put it to the test lately, nor should I have to, nor should I put it to the test because that's not the point of it. But huh, okay, this is something I don't talk about. But most people, when they're with their spirit guides, if I'm around and we're interacting, the spirit guides defer to me
Hmm,
because I'm seen as the person capable of doing it more. So I tend to have, even when I was the one time I had a person training, teaching me, her spirit guides wouldn't allow the class to end until I said it was okay.
interesting.
Yeah. So I've gone to my experience has been a little bit different than other people's experiences. And even people's spirit guides will talk to me directly sometimes.
Yeah, see, we all have our different takes on things and different strengths, if you will, or
Right.
areas of channeling. And not everybody realizes they're channeling when they are.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like even me, with all the experience I have, the last task I finished, the long one that lasted 20 years, near the end, I wasn't sure if I was channeling anymore or not because it was so ingrained, the behavior, the flow was so ingrained that I was like, am I done? I must be done, right? But then when it finally ended, it was like, all right, there's all the signs that it's done. Okay. But I was
Right,
confused because it went on for so long. My maximum, as I like to call them, marathon channeling sessions will go no longer than 3 years. It'll be on and off, like when you do a super marathon, you don't constantly channel, but you're basically constantly in that state of always being always in connection,
right.
even if you're not always directly channeling. I mean, technically, you're always connected because that's part of you,
But you're aware.
but you're aware. So there's always, I know I'm connected, but then because it went on for so long, it was like, am I not done? Like I'm not even interacting with the people I'm doing this for anymore. So like, why am I still connected? And then the task finished, and it's like, all right. This was stuff just happening on the spirit plane now, so I didn't have to be in connection with them anymore. This was just stuff done there, which is a hard one to explain. So once again, for people listening, your spiritual life will be different, and it'll be not everyone will get it, and people will think certain things are different and off, but they're not. They're just, but you have to get used that you're working in two places, not just one.
Right. And whenever you make a change in
Mm-hmm.
your life, whether it's intentional or otherwise, whether it's spiritual, physical, whatever it is, be aware that the people around you are seeing, even if they're, they might not be conscious of it right away,
Right.
but they're picking up that there are new things happening. And that triggers their warning system of, uh-oh, the status quo is being disrupted. Warning, warning, danger, Will
Yes.
Robinson. I don't know if you ever saw Lost in Space, but anyway.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it triggers this warning. And that person, a lot of it will depend on their lens, what their life
Yeah.
experience has been like, and how secure they are, and where they are in their stages of awareness, awakening or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so all those things come into play, and what you get is their reaction from that place. It
Right.
doesn't mean anything about you. It means everything about them and their lens. So what they're telling you with their reaction is a lot of interesting information about them. It's not you. But you're having to deal with it because, it's directed to you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's honestly not about you, it's about them. However, those things will come up because human beings don't like the status quo to be disrupted. It's unknown and people don't like the unknown, right? Typically,
Mm-hmm.
it's a very unusual person that will leap into the unknown willingly and happily, and usually they have some kind of death wish or something going on when they do that, right? There's something a little different about that person.
Right.
But we're all here to get the lessons that we came for
Mm-hmm.
and to get them in different ways. And, being on this planet in this body gives us senses with which to interact on a physical plane. And then you have the integration of things spiritual, witchy, wizardy, however you
Right.
want to look at it, doesn't matter.
Well, that's the thing, right? I don't make a distinction because it's in the end, it's the pursuit of wisdom.
Right. So, however
So
it
the
comes
title,
to you,
actually, I've had this conversation actually, but one of the things, one another reason why I'm not always that keen on calling myself a wizard, even though the insistence of the spirits I work with, because in their teaching of me, they're always beware of the titles that people give, right? So like someone can call themselves a light worker, someone can call themselves a witch, someone can call themselves a shaman, someone can call, but they're not necessarily that, or they may not be, and not even out of they're doing anything ill-intended. They just might not understand what they're going through, and so they only know that title, so they use it.
Which is why
So,
it's always really good to get a definition.
right.
When I began our conversation today with you, I
Mm-hmm.
explained how I view
Right.
what I am or what I identify as, etc., because eclectic witch means
Right.
what? And it basically means I interact with my environment in different ways depending on what I'm trying to do and depending on what calls to me. Right? It's
Right.
very easy flow and it's not rule bound. So, but I got to explain that because somebody else might come along who is Wiccan, but they
Mm-hmm.
describe themselves as a witch and they have a whole lot of rules and you can only do this at the full moon and it has to be the new moon and it has to be this way and that way. And it's like, no. Intention is the big part of whatever you're doing.
Yes.
And where the moon's at can be helpful for sure. And there's certain things that are really cool to do at different phases of the moon, absolutely. And it does affect human beings, it does affect the planet. Look
Mm-hmm.
at the tides. And, years and years ago, I worked in a psychiatric hospital,
Mm-hmm.
and I can assure you the nurses would have a very big argument every month around full moon time as
Right.
to who got night shift because it was a hell of a shift.
Right.
And having done that, I can tell you it really does
Mm-hmm.
make a difference. So, people listening to your podcast are obviously they're looking at things spiritual, so you probably
Mm-hmm.
already know this. But that's something I explained that the moon does make a difference. All of the planets do, and so do the larger asteroids. They all make a difference.
Right.
But it's not the only place where you can work. So if
Right.
you're someone who fits elsewhere, who finds that you're called to do things differently, and it's not in anybody else's book, you haven't read it anywhere, well, I'm going to say that might be something really cool for you to explore
Mm-hmm.
and be curious about. Like, is it working for you? What are you getting from it? And how do you feel about that? These are all much more valid questions than what book did you read it in?
Right. Well, that's the thing, right? In my own personal training, there's a reason why I only had one teacher, one human teacher, was just to give me a brief understanding. This is how people are doing things. So learn from that. And I did. But the rest of my teachings were always, okay, this is how it works. Here's the flow. Like spirits taught me directly how to do things, which always seems weird to say because I'm skeptical minded and I teach people to be skeptical whenever I teach anyone anything. It's like be skeptical and not necessarily from just the perspective of doubt them, but from the if you never apply any doubt to anything, you don't know if you're learning properly,
Oh, I'm a very skeptical person.
right?
I advocate that. I mean, with,
Like,
with
yeah.
human design, I
Mm-hmm.
invite people, bring your skepticism. That's absolutely cool because I call it a living science. It's the way I
Right.
get around the question of, but you have a science background. Why are you doing
Mm-hmm.
this? Is it because I'm going to give you the hypothesis? I am going to give you the outcomes that I anticipate you're going to have, and you are going to put the white coat on and go test it. If
Right.
you get repeatable results, we have a winner, and that is science in action. But be as skeptical as you like, because I don't want you to take my word for it. I want you to go and try it. And
Well, and
that's,
two, right? The other, yes, because that when you're skeptical and you're healthy skeptical, not just, everything is not true, but you're healthy skeptical, you can internalize what you're learning.
yeah, definitely. And the thing with that unhealthy skeptical is that's when you go into cynicism.
Right.
It's not skeptical now because you won't let anything
Hmm.
be proven to you. You're just cynical about everything, jaded about everything. And that's an unhealthy
Right.
viewpoint because it keeps you stuck.
Yeah. It's a defense mechanism that protects you in times of danger when you don't know what else to do. Like, because I never look at like any emotion as bad. It has its reason. So if your fear makes you run away, that's because you're not equipped to deal with what you're dealing with at that moment. So your
Right.
body's going, okay, we're going to survive. The cynicism too, right? You're not equipped right now to process what you were just told. So you need time to sit back, process things.
But
So
being
take
stuck,
cynicism in what it's used for, and that's for you to sit back and process what you were just told.
but being stuck in any one of
That's
those
right. Being stuck for too
modes,
long is not good.
that is an issue. Yeah.
Right.
That's where I sort of try and prod people into moving, try something different. Let's get up and out of the chair and let's go do something. Because when you get stuck in that space, you're not growing, you're not learning, you're stagnating.
Hmm.
You can't grow and learn from a standstill. So
Gotcha.
it might serve its purpose for a while, but it is not a way of life, or ideally not, because then you're not learning anything. And I'm not here to judge other people's paths. Not at all. Like I'm busy with my own. Thank you. I'm on my thing. I got enough to handle with myself, let alone trying
Right.
to deal with other people's pathways. But I do like to interact, and if I can help, I will. And if I can't, then I'm going to leave you to do your thing. And I think that's ideally what we're all here for, right? Is where you can help,
Mhm.
help, and where
That's
you
right.
can't, give them
Well, we're a
space.
societal creature, right? Even from a purely scientific perspective, by definition, we have to be helpful because we're societal.
And it is kind of hardwired. I mean, if you do something for a person and they get good results, I mean, look at the line of work we're both in with WildFit, right?
Right.
When is your happiest moment? When that client says, I have all these wins and I'm doing
Right. Exactly.
amazingly because
Mm.
this is this. And you're like, if I didn't have to pay a mortgage or anything, I could just live on this. This is my soul food.
Yes.
I can be happy with these outcomes. And if we're honest, that is the thing that feeds us the most, is when other people do well because we helped, or at least they did well while we helped. Whether it's
Right.
because of it or not, you can't really say. But I mean, they show up and do the work, but you're the
Hmm.
person offering the guidance. And
Right.
there's no better feeling than that. We all feel that way, I think, from toddlerhood, from babyhood. As soon as you make your best buddy smile after
Well,
they've been
yeah. It's
crying,
easiest to see in kids, right? Because once they do something that looks like they help you, even if it doesn't help you, but you show them that it helped, the
they're
look on
so
their face
happy.
is like, yeah,
They're so happy. You just
yeah.
made their day and they go dancing off and they're all thrilled.
Hmm.
And they will literally do things to try and make other people happy. This is it's a beautiful thing, and it's also a trap, because when the child's not nurtured properly, which frequently happens
Hmm.
unfortunately, then they learn to become people pleasers at their own
Oh,
expense.
yeah.
And that's something that, it's one of the areas that I work on, is undoing that for people, because we learn it very early on. If you have to go and sit on Santa's lap when you're a little kid
Hmm.
and you don't want to, you're learning that this person has more control than you do.
That's right.
If you have to hug grandma, even though, she smells of cigarettes and you don't want to, grandma, who's the adult here and who should be able to accept no, isn't
Right.
expected to, the child has to give in. So
Right.
you learn from a very early age to people please, but that instinct is there naturally anyway. And
Mm.
as adults, even if you're not stuck in people pleasing, we're always going to love to see other people do well.
Yes.
And if you don't, you've got something going on there that you could do with some work on.
Well, yes, and that's it, right? Then there's something's wrong in the system if you can't have pleasure from other people's victories, their excitement, their
Yeah.
happiness. If
And
that can't
then you've
lift your spirits, then there's something.
then you've been taught that life is a zero sum game,
Yes, zero sum. Yeah.
and that if somebody else is winning, you can't be. And that is usually something that you've been raised to believe. And it's problematic because it stops you from being happy. You can't be a happy person because other people are definitely going to do better than you. We have a massive population on this planet. Of course they are.
Yeah.
Some other people won't do as well. But if you feel happy when somebody's not doing well, because it means you're doing better, then you have some work to do. I invite you to find a way to work on that, because it's stunting your growth. It really is stunting your personal growth to
It
have
is.
that attitude. And somebody else can succeed. And that's gold. That's just like, that's so cool. And you can enjoy that and bask in that and feel good. And it doesn't make one difference to whether you're going to be successful or not. Or if you do think it's going to make a difference, it will encourage you to do more, to do better, to keep going because you've
Mhm.
seen somebody else be successful.
Well, that's
So,
the thing, and you can learn from their success.
right. So,
If
what?
nothing else, I always tell people, sometimes like even if you look at it from a certain selfish perspective, even if you're only from a self-interested perspective, if you see someone else succeed, acknowledge the success, appreciate the success, and learn from it.
Right.
Even if you don't, like I said earlier, using Donald Trump as the example, I'm not a fan of the guy. Like, there's things he does where I see the motivation, and I'm like, whatever your success is, your motivations bug me. But I can recognize the success he had, and I can recognize how he got to that success. Maybe not do it that way particularly, because, like I said, the motivation to me is where I have an issue. But there are things to learn. Like I tell people, right? When you and it's almost like a cliche in movies and in fiction that when someone is down, the villain swoops in and lifts them up, and then that person is loyal to the villain.
Right.
Well, that applies in real life. If you see someone down and you help them, they'll be loyal to you, and you're not the villain. So you're just taking the villain's technique, but you've done something good with it.
And you just reminded me of a story for that, which I think illustrates what you've just said really well.
Right.
So my kids grew up traveling. I've been
Right.
traveling all my life since I was 6 months old. And on one of those journeys, my eldest son was 16. He was 16 at the
Mm-hmm.
time. And he was in Nepal. And he and his dad were rounding a corner and, they were on a trek. And Maoist rebels, there is a rebel insurgency
Okay.
there, and it was
Right.
particularly heightened at this point. Maoist rebels came around the corner. They're armed to the teeth, they got guns, and
Mm-hmm.
they want money. And this kid that was roughly the same age as my son went up to him and said, give me your money. And my son's response was amazing. He said, well, I don't have any money. I'm 16. And the kid said, well, why does that mean you don't have any money? And his English was good enough that they could have a conversation. And what ended up happening was my son and this 16-year-old Maoist rebel, more or less,
Right.
sat down next to each other and they were having a conversation, and my son said, well, why did you become a rebel? What happened? And the kid said, well, the rebels came to my school and they said that if we joined them, they'd give us food and clothes and they'd give food for my family. He
Mm-hmm.
said, and we didn't have any, so I joined them,
Right.
and people left my school and we joined the rebels. They have no idea what's going on politically. They don't care. What they care about is they're getting food, clothes, and their families are being looked after. And so there's this kid armed with this whacking great gun and everything, asking people, demanding from people
Right.
money. But the two of them were so interested in each other and what their experience was, because neither of them could quite get the other person's
Right.
experience without talking about it. But there's a beautiful example of, the rebels went in and said, hey, we'll look after you. Just
Yeah.
join us. They
Well, that's
didn't talk
classic,
about
right? With
ideology.
terrorist groups, crime groups. The government isn't providing or the society isn't providing, so that group will come in. We'll
Right.
provide at a price
Right.
that you can pay
Well,
later.
religion
Yeah.
does that all the time.
Yeah.
The number of people that I know that have become born again, for example,
Mm-hmm.
if you ask them their story, there's a major trauma involved.
Right.
And the religion stepped in as a support. And so now they're indebted to the religion, or they feel that they are, or they feel
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I didn't belong there, I belong here. And so
Right.
they get into that religion. That is very, very often how that works.
Mm-hmm. Some people get
And
sucked into cults, the whole
oh yeah,
thing. You're right. There's an
yeah,
emptiness that group decides, but yes, they're doing it for less than honorable means. But you can take that same technique because that technique works and do good things with it.
absolutely. I mean, how the behavioral science works on that, right?
Yeah.
You've explained it beautifully. And for this
Well,
rebel kid,
since I was a little kid, I've read
if
lots of books on psychology, like
but if
from
this rebel
probably
kid,
nine on.
if you asked him
Yeah.
what are the rebels fighting about,
Mm-hmm.
he'd be like, I don't know. What are we fighting? Like, are
Yeah.
we
Well,
doing
yeah.
something? Because he's just going along with where they're going and he's telling people he wants their money because that's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And, he didn't know from anything else. I don't know that I got the impression from what my son was saying that this kid hadn't seen any kind of combat yet.
Right.
But, maybe he hadn't been with them very long. I don't know. But they were able to go on their separate ways without any kind of violence or anything. But it was really, my son's reaction of, oh, well, no, I don't have money. I'm 16. Like, why would
Yeah.
I have money?
Yeah.
And the other kids are like, well, why would you not? And from that place of what's going on here? They were
Yeah.
able to have that conversation and shift the narrative of how that was going to go.
Yeah. There's actually I've listened to a few, not TED Talks, but I've listened to interviews with people where they do discuss their experience with terrorists, and you do run into that kind of thing all the time. Not
Yeah, not
everyone in
that,
the organization is like they're there because they just have to be there for something, or it's almost like a to help to do. It's like joining the military almost. A lot of people do
no,
it
it's exactly
because
that.
I'm
No,
poor, like I gotta do
it's
something.
exactly that. I mean, in the US, people join the military. Why? Because it's going to give them an income and a place to
Right,
live and training and maybe school and da da da. They don't join necessarily because I'm off to save my country.
right.
There may be some people like that, sure,
Mhm.
but for the majority, what the appeal is that they're going to have this structure and they're going to have this guarantee of how things go,
Right.
and so they join, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. Be clear on your motives. I always like people to be clear on that, but yeah, I mean, did they join so they could go kill somebody? Usually not.
No.
Hopefully not. It's not
Yeah.
usually
And I've heard stories of
the
people
prime
who,
reason.
even violent people killing for the first time, were like, well, wow, that's like totally not anywhere near was as I was expecting. Not especially not in conditions of war, like where people are fighting for something. If you don't
Right.
instantly kill someone, it's still a thing, and then you get to watch them die. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's so, we get told this story of what we're looking at. And that circles right back to the earliest part of our conversation where, I don't think we were recording it at that time, but when I'm traveling or meeting somebody, I like to not know what I'm getting
right.
into so that I can make my own opinions and then I'll read about it later. So
Mhm.
I've met some fascinating people and not given a second thought to who they are in the world, what their
Right.
society status is, because I want to learn about that person from them. And so that curiosity piece, that's my secret weapon, is curiosity. Because if you go in with that, your ego can't fit in the same room. And so the curiosity
Mhm.
takes away self-consciousness and takes away that whole, "Oh, but I'm talking to the king, or I'm talking to, I've had tea with the king of Ladakh.
Well, oh yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah, and lovely guy, rides a motorbike, like very cool dude. But I wasn't thinking, ooh, this is King of Ladakh, and this is certain ways I have to be. It
Mhm.
was more like, this guy's fascinating, talk to me. And so there were some certain protocols, but I was peripherally aware of them
Yeah.
rather than focusing on them. And then we could have a conversation, and it was really cool. And guess what? People who are in those kind of places, they love to have somebody that would talk to them like they're a human being rather
Right.
than a role, right? So, getting the ego out of the way
Mhm.
by putting curiosity in its
Yeah.
place.
And you know what?
It,
This is another good one for the listeners. As you open spiritually, you're gonna get a read on people. And even when you think there's limits on what you should say, sometimes you're right to follow the flow and treat people like human beings. Because in the end, that's all you're going to see people as going forward is as human beings. Because you're
I,
not going
I
to.
honestly,
Go
I
ahead.
honestly think you need to go with the flow first
Yeah.
because it's not going to send you wrong.
No. There's got to be a lot stacked against you going to the flow. As I like to tell people, I kind of have a thing where it's geez, sorry about that. I thought my thing was off. But anyway, that's a loud freaking ringtone.
I didn't
I,
hear it, so maybe it's
oh, you
not on
didn't
the
hear it? Good.
recording. Mm-mm.
Oh, it's like a I don't know what the English word is, but klaxons? Klaxon? I don't know. But like, an alarm.
Aha.
It's a text from my sister and she likes that one. But anyways, it's a big alert. But crap, now what was I gonna say? What were we talking about? That lost me now.
Flow, talking to people as though they're actually
Oh
people.
yeah. So what I was gonna I sometimes had this conversation, and this isn't to discourage anyone, but there's a certain talk in people who do motivational speaking and wellness where you just have to will it. But I'm like, but there's like what is there, 8 billion people on the planet now? Your one will, what if a bunch of people's will is against you? So you do have to learn flow better. It's not just your will to do it. You have to understand how things flow so that even if all these people don't want you to do something, you have to learn how to work with their energy too. to get where you want to go.
Well, again, think of the river, right?
Yeah,
If the river's flowing in a certain direction, if you want to move the river, you change the river. You can,
right.
manipulate it by building different walls and
Yeah,
digging trenches and stuff like that. Like
right.
you can
When you
do stuff.
understand the river, you understand the flow of the water, and
You
or
do what's
that's how you get around other people willing things against you.
Yeah, you work with what's there in a way that is going to work, right? If you're trying to get the river to go uphill,
Hmm.
well, you've bitten off a very big chunk of something that's going to take a lot of engineering and
Yeah.
it's not worth doing.
Mm.
But if you want to just change the direction of it
Yeah.
to keep going with the metaphor, then you're just going to dig a different channel and siphon it down that way. It's the same power. It's just moving in a different place.
Yeah. Or like tacking against the wind when you're
Yeah,
sailing.
right.
Wind is going in a different direction, but you managed to use the wind to your favor anyways.
Exactly. So yeah, spiritual awakenings, I think, are so fascinating because they're so individual. And I would, I'm really curious. You may notice that's a big thing for me, but
Hmm.
I'm curious for each person. What is the story that comes up in your mind about that spiritual awakening? What are you telling yourself in those early stages that this means? Like, what does it mean about you? What does it mean about your past? What does it mean about the people around you? What are you making it mean? Because whatever you're making it mean right now, it gives you useful information, but it's not what you think it is.
Right.
So, it's like get curious about it, listen to it, maybe write it down, let it go. And then be open to, but what is it really?
Mm. You know what? You say that?
I do.
Normally, I'm going to save this for, usually I say this for the end of the episode, but you know what? I think this should be the assignment. And to tie it into divination, what I'm going to want you guys listening to do, think about your past, your spiritual awakening, and then pick a divination tool of your choice and see if you can explore it better. Because really, that's what divination tools are for. It's not so much an oracle to tell you the future as much as it is really, you can use it that way, but it's more to bring information out about yourself or a situation. So I think a good assignment is to do that, is to look at, just like Michaela said, look at your spiritual opening. And then because you're thinking about it and you're processing it, then use a divination tool to see if you get more clarification or you get something that matches when you're using your divination tool that matches what you already know about your growth or your spiritual awakening. That's what I'm thinking. I think that's a good assignment for the end of this one.
Yeah. I'd love to
Thank
hear
you for providing
what
it.
people, I'd love to people hear what people come up with if they're willing to share that because it's, part of building a community and hanging out together and having these conversations is all about what's going to come out of it. Where can you go next? And,
Mm-hmm.
maybe which direction are we going to move the river in? Are we moving it or are we floating down a little more? Are there some rapids coming up? Like what's going on? It's interesting to see. Like life is so rich and available, right? There's so much available
Well,
if you can just
absolutely.
access it. And
And
you
it's
can
funny, right?
access it if you get out of your own way.
Yeah. Because I know right now a lot of the people that I know that listen to this podcast, I don't know everyone because there's more people listening than people I know listen to it. But I know one thing that I will say, just like Michaela is saying, once you're opening spiritually, you see how much life has to offer. You really start to get that, to use the word flow, of how life moves around you. Not only does it let you predict things and lets you see where your best opportunities are, but it lets you see opportunities in the first place that you never would have thought of existed. And that's pretty much it is, if not, in my opinion, the biggest perk or the best perk of being spiritually awakening or being awakened spiritually is seeing all these new opportunities or opportunities even in general.
Yeah, in fact, I'd go as far as to say it's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Is that your field of vision and the field of possibilities
Mhm.
opens up in a way that you can recognize it's there and choose. And we have choice. We have choice all over the place. Even if you think, well, my circumstances suck and I don't have any money and I don't have this and I don't have that, you still have choice. So choosing an action to take, any action, something small, small is good. Lots of small actions add up to big ones. So, but take an action and go into it with curiosity and then see what comes next and then what's next. And with a spiritual awakening, you have so many tools to work with. You don't even know what you've got yet. There's so much that's possible. I mean, I'm learning new stuff all the time, and I love it when something new drops in. I get a lot of downloads, and when something new drops
Right.
in, it's like, oh, that's so cool, and I get all excited about it, and I have to run around in circles for a bit to burn off the energy, and then I go use that
Well,
thing.
yes,
But
that's for sure.
yeah, it's
All these
really
experiences,
it's so much fun, and you're never at the end of it.
no, and that's the whole through your whole life, actually even
Ideally.
beyond.
Ideally, yeah, because if you think you've got everything and you think you know everything, you, my friend, have hit a stumbling block. And you need to look up and see that there is sky over there,
Yes.
and then keep going. Because you haven't learned everything. None of us have. I'm always studying, I'm getting certificates left, right, and center. That just means that that's my way of having fun. I love to learn. And the paper comes with it. That's cool. But I love to learn and I love to experience, and that's what I'm here for. So, you're never coming to the end of that until you stop.
That's true. That is completely true. You know what? Speaking of flow, I think this is a good place to end the episode. So you know what? I really want to thank you for coming on, Michaela. Michaela. Sorry, I know a few Michaelas, that's why.
It's close enough. It's all good.
But yeah, no, this was really good. We did cover divination, but we got, you know what we covered, I know from about my listeners that this was a lot. The way we went was what my listeners need. It's even what I need, but definitely I know from the listeners, I know this is something they could use and it's very helpful to them. So you know what? Welcome aboard. And you know what? Thank you for this episode.
Well, thank you for inviting me aboard. I'm delighted to be here, and I love having these conversations that are not restricted and scripted, because they go where they need to go, and then they run their course.
All right. And for everyone else, until next time. Before I forget, go to this episode's notes to get the link for details for this episode's assignment at the Think Like a Wizard podcast subreddit.